Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is an advantage to being this far down the dais. There's too much material to cover that's come out of this briefing. So to my colleagues on the other side, they like to talk about this firing of the IGs. They forget the 2022 law that specifically says 30 days paid, then you can be fired. And then the unelected people that are working in the executive branch, as far as I know, there are only 2 elected people throughout the entire elected branch, executive branch. That's the president and the vice president. Every other one of the 2 million plus the 12 million contractors are unelected. So everybody that we are praising, as well as the people that we are condemning, are all unelected. Mr. Natsios, it's either you or during one of your colleague on the other aisle during your testimony said, well, it's only a small number. And it reminded me of the reporter that said about the Argentinian gang taking over just a couple of apartment buildings. Well, it's only a couple of apartment buildings. This country is $36 trillion in debt. We are trying in this Congress to do something about that, but we have taken all of these small amounts now for decades, and they now add up to $36 trillion in debt. So every small amount is crucial. 40%, you said that 40% of the USAID are compliance officers. That's not the issue. What are they complying to? During the Biden administration, they were complying to things that were not in the interest of the United States. I don't care about the percentage. What are they requiring compliance of would be my question. So this is for Dr. Yoho and Max. So the title of this agency is Agency for International Development. Is it not? Is that correct? Mm-hmm. International Development. So just in the few grants that we've been looking at, there is a USAID for activities in D.C. to provide USAID employees in D.C. with counseling, organizational resilience, wellness, and work-life balance. Now, I realize that D.C. might be different than the rest of the United States, but it's not international. We'll skip over and having worked in both the third world, Africa and the Middle East, we'll skip over the climate change because a poor country doesn't care about climate change. They care about survival. But I want to go to a USAID contract, for activities in Albuquerque. And this is for you, Mr. Yoho, Dr. Yoho, Emergency DEI support in Albuquerque. Now, I assume that's Albuquerque, New Mexico. So it was in 2022 through 2023. So it may have been in your last budget. Were you aware of emergency DEI support? Probably not. It's an unfair question. In Albuquerque. So, and then the last one I want to talk about is another USAID for activities in D.C. Now, this one is really interesting because it is to hire an LGBT advisor for the USAID's U.S. Personal Services Contractor Program. But the interesting thing about this is it is to undisclosed contractor.
Wow.
That one requires some sort of investigation. So my question is to you, Mr. Natsios, why do we have activities in the United States if this is international development?
Well, I haven't read that, so I can't tell what's in it, but I can tell you
Microphone.
Sorry. I can tell you I was in a commission. This is when I was teaching at Georgetown after I left AID. A number of officers came back from Afghanistan and Iraq whose colleagues had been murdered by Taliban. We lost a large number of contract staff in both countries, and they committed suicide. And so they created a commission, which they asked me to serve on, and I did, to see what we need to do when people come back. Because, and this is true for the military, my son was in Afghanistan. I was in the first Gulf War as a major in the Army Reserves that was mobilized. Actually, I was in the Bush administration. I left to go to Iraq. And there's a suicide problem in the U.S. military. So I believe, but I'm not sure, that may have been counseling, because they do it in an organized way. If they see depression when people come back from the field who've seen a lot of violence, then they put them through.
I'll actually give you that, because you're right. We still have 17 military veterans that commit suicide every day.
Right.
I'm on the VA committee as well. I was in Afghanistan and the Gulf for Iraq.
Let me mention the compliance officers, what they comply with. It's a very good question. The federal acquisition regulations, which were passed by the U.S. Congress, I might add, it's 2,000 pages long. I tried to read it when I was the aid administrator. I almost jumped out the 4-story window. They are so complicated. They're worse than the IRS code. We have to comply with them. When people say, well, why is the aid stuff so complicated?
Let me stop you there, because leadership matters. And in the Biden administration, leadership came from the top. We will not, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back, but that is the central point. It's not the regulations, it's leadership at the top, and I yield back.